many people would argue, your actions. How do you respond to their families?
It's not because of our actions. Those children are dead because David Koresh had them killed. There's no question about that. He had those fires started. He had 51 days to release those children. He chose those children to die.
I don't know who started the fire or fires. I don't know who fired bullets into these people's bodies. I don't know from what origin the bullets came from. So if we could completely agree that we do not have a definitive answer of the sourcing, then in fact what we have is an open homicide.
Is there anything that we've missed that we should go after in the remaining 2 days?
Yes, sir. I think we've missed some of the questions as to, as I mentioned earlier, why items of evidence have disappeared, why the crime scene was destroyed before it could be evaluated. These areas, especially the evidence disappearing.
I mean, you have, in essence, a crime scene that was so seriously flawed through ignorance or through an air of an elite mentality, or in fact, there was a conscious decision made to not collect evidence for any sort of serious examination other than to try and prove that the Davidians had weaponry and firepower enough to kill federal agents. Some of these bodies exhibited characteristics of perhaps being shot. Did anyone fire from any other location?
The information that we've always been given was that there was no federal gunfire on the day of April 19th. Well, in reviewing the photographs and the 302s, the statements in them, I would say there are some questions that need to be answered.
The FBI named the sniper positions Sierra 1, Sierra 2, Sierra 3. On April 19th, FBI Special Agent Charles Riley stated in his after-action report that he had heard shots fired that morning from sniper position number 1, the undercover house. The position was occupied by the Blue Sniper team, led by Special Agent Lon Horiuchi. Horiuchi stated that neither he nor his snipers fired their weapons on April 19th.
The fact that Agent Horiuchi states in his 302 that the snipers at Sierra 1, which was the undercover house, did not fire, and there is a shell casing, expended shell casing there visible on the floor, would also raise a question.
4 expended shell casings are later found at Sierra 1, the location of Agent Horiuchi's Blue Sniper team.
What makes this particularly interesting is Mr. Horiuchi, coincidentally, happens to be the FBI agent who shot and killed Vicki Weaver at Ruby Ridge and has been charged with manslaughter by the state of Idaho.
In August 1992, white separatists Randy and Vicki Weaver were involved in a standoff with the FBI at their mountain home. Agent Horiuchi shot and killed Vicki Weaver, who was standing in the window of the door holding her 10-month-old daughter.
She was standing there holding the baby in her arms, holding the door so we could get in after they'd wounded me. And this guy is still running free.
According to an internal federal government investigation, Horiuchi's shot is termed unconstitutional. Lon Horiuchi was never tried. 7 months later, he was the leader of the Blue Sniper team at Waco, accompanied by most of the FBI team from Ruby Ridge.
Our desire was to get them out, to use non-lethal means in a systematic manner so that they would come before the bar and face justice. We did not want this to occur. At some point, we had to up the ante. He was continually fortifying. He was demanding and was seeking provocation to get into a shootout with us, which we were refusing to do.
According to the FBI's on-site activity log, at 9:03 a.m., FBI Command advised Sierra 2 that an unknown subject could be seen traveling on foot at the back of the building. In this aerial photo, taken at approximately 9 a.m., a Davidian appears to be leaving the building and walking toward the back of the compound. The log indicates that Falcon 2, an FBI helicopter, took off to intercept the subject. As it approaches Mount Carmel, several flashes can be seen coming from the side of the helicopter. Dr. Edward Allard, a former supervising scientist in video and television imagery at the U.S. government's Night Vision Directorate, examined the helicopter footage and concludes that the flashes are gunfire.
When we analyze these flashes, as we have done, in 1/60th of a second time frames, it appears that there's 3 shots coming from the helicopter, but in fact, each one of those 3 shots can be broken down into 1/60th time frames, 60th of a second, and we find, for instance, in the first flash, there's 5 separate shots being fired. And it's indicative of a machine gun that's firing at about 600 rounds per minute.
In this view of one of the FBI's helicopters, a pedestal-mounted machine gun can be clearly seen in the doorway.
FBI agents did not return any fire throughout the entire day, in spite of being fired upon numerous times by occupants of the compound.
On the other hand, since this is on a helicopter and people might say that it's reflections from the windshield, it's impossible for these shots that you're seeing with your own eyes to be solar reflections, because if it were so, the helicopter would have to be violently moving back and forth like a mirror in your hands, and this is impossible. So it's in our opinion, it's clearly machine gun fire from the helicopter.
In coming out, the conversation, as I remember it, was, well, if we come out, will we be shot?
According to the autopsy reports, Philip Henry was shot several times in the chest, shoulder, and head. Jimmy Riddle was shot once in the forehead. Neither of them had soot accumulation in their trachea or bronchial tubes or carbon monoxide in their blood, indicating that they died before the fire started.
Later, when I saw the autopsy report and seen that he died of a gunshot wound to the head, it made me wonder if it was in fact the snipers that were in the barn garage that was in the back of the property.
The autopsy reports also indicated extensive body mutilation to Philip Henry and Jimmy Riddle. The entire right side of Riddle's body from the shoulder to the hip had been torn away. In previous testimony, Dr. Nizam Pirwani, the medical examiner, observed that this could have been the result of the collapse of the building or an encounter with a tank tread. Philip Henry's body was interred during the year following his death. However, a new autopsy was requested by Jimmy Riddle's relatives to settle the circumstances surrounding the missing portion of Riddle's body and the gunshot wound to his head. Dr. Ron Grazier, the forensic pathologist who conducted the examination, concluded in his findings that the damage to Riddle's skeletal remains is consistent with a tank having torn the body apart. A forensic examination of the bullet entry wound in Jimmy Riddle's skull could not be conducted because the evidentiary portion of the skull was missing. Dr. Pirwani performed the original autopsy and was asked to provide a certified copy of his report for comparison. According to Riddle's relatives, the local Texas authorities and U.S. Marshals refused to allow Dr. Pirwani to turn over the documents.
We got to Dr. Pirwani's office trying to get the information on my brother, Jimmy Riddle. Dr. Pirwani told me that he didn't know why they kept trying to keep the information from us. He didn't know what they were hiding, and that he had the information, but he was ordered by the U.S. Marshals and the JPs not to release any information to me.
While Americans were watching events unfold at the front of the building, the FBI's infrared video shows what took place at the rear of the structure.
What a FLIR really does is it takes invisible radiation, which is called infrared radiation, and it converts it into visual radiation, you might say, that we can see with the eye. What we have here is a tank infantry type of an operation. As the tank moves forward, two men have dropped out of the escape hatch. They roll over, and as they roll over, they open up with automatic gunfire. We've measured the actual time of the individual flashes, and they occur at a fraction of a second, in some cases a 30th of a second. There is absolutely nothing in nature that can cause thermal flashes to occur in a 30th of a second.
Somebody related or who had prepared a film or analyzed a film, representatives of the department and representatives of the FBI went over it in detail and concluded that there was no basis for suggesting that shots had been fired.
As the tank crushes the roof of the gymnasium, gunfire can be seen streaming into the dining room from positions in the courtyard.
I stopped counting after about 62 individual shots.
Interviewed on NBC's Meet the Press on May the 4th, 1997, FBI Director Louis Freeh stated that no shots were fired by any federal agents outside of the compound, and that allegations raised about gunfire seemed to be based on some inferences from infrared flash patterns and heat patterns. I think the overwhelming evidence clearly shows that no shots were fired.
It's indicative of sunlight reflecting off something and registering on the flare. It could be a thermal pattern. If it were a thermal pattern, there is nothing that persists from that.
Right.
So therefore, it is more likely to have been reflected light off of something shiny, in which the sunlight now gives an apparent temperature rise.
From the basic physics, it's safe to say that it's impossible for the Waco FLIR to detect any solar reflections of any kind.
On our wish list as investigators was taking a harder look at the FLIR. The congressional staff was never able to find or take advantage of a genuine FLIR expert to watch the FLIR video with us and to understand exactly what we were seeing.
By comparison, this Department of Defense FLIR video, taken in Somalia in October of 1993 as troops exit a helicopter, shows gunfire similar to the thermal signature on the FLIR videotape at Waco. A former analyst from the U.S. intelligence community, Maurice Cox, tested the FBI's claim, applying the principles of solar geometry. For an aircraft flying at an altitude of 9,000 feet, a flash anomaly occurring on the ground would be visible in an area only 100 feet wide. Frame-by-frame measurements of the FLIR videotape showed a repetition of 10 flashes per second, the same rate as a machine gun firing at 600 rounds per minute. According to the Sunlight Reflections Report, in order to duplicate these multiple flashes, the reflective surfaces would have to be exactly the same shape and size and positioned in an array too precise to occur by chance. To record sunlight reflections at 10 flashes per second, the FBI's small aircraft would have had to travel at Mach 1.8, nearly twice the speed of sound. The Sun Reflection Report concluded that the flash signatures on the Waco FLIR video could only have been caused by gunfire. In January 1999, Mr. Cox challenged Director Freeh and Bureau scientists to disprove his findings. They did not respond.
If someone comes to me to understand the data, I need to tell them the uncertainty associated with it. If the government is only telling them this was not a field of fire, well, the government is refusing to look at this, and anybody with their plain eyes could see, well, something's going on there.
You know, when you think of the fact they're shooting automatic weapons fire into a building with children in it, there's something wrong.
Dr. Allard has stated that this video shows gunfire being directed into Mount Carmel from the outside of Mount Carmel on April 19th. The only people that could have come from would have been federal agents.
Other flashes can be detected on the FLIR tape within an hour of the fire, such as this detonation in the courtyard, which has a thermal signature that is consistent with a hand grenade exploding. And more gunfire can be seen near this tank. But if the FBI's claim is true, and the hostage rescue team didn't fire at Ranch Davidians, then there is another possibility.
According to what we saw written in the Book of Nahum, we were to undergo a military-style attack. We were to be attacked by tanks and people from the military.